Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of 40, maybe 45, maybe 52, staring at a bank balance that hovers somewhere south of $1 million, and something cold begins crawling up your spine. Not panic yet, no, just the quiet, sick realization that the years ahead are no longer infinite. The calendar has turned predatory. 2027 is already sharpening its teeth. The man who once believed time was an ally now feels it pressing against his throat like a blade held by an unseen hand. He tells himself he is behind but not broken, yet every night the same reel plays. The house that will never be paid off before the second mortgage of aging arrives. The children who will need help he cannot give. The retirement that keeps receding like a shoreline in a nightmare where you walk and the water never gets closer. He performs calmness the way failing actors perform confidence, tight smile, rehearsed lines about compounding and long term, while inside something is screaming. This is the modern terror disguised as maturity, the slow suffocation of a life that looked responsible from the outside. The 401 statements arrive like funeral invitations written in soft pastels. The job that once felt secure now feels like a polite hostage situation. The marriage bed carries the faint chill of unspoken calculations. Who will get sick first? Who will be the burden? How many years of life can actually be afforded at current burn rate? You already know the numbers are lying to you. Not because they are wrong, but because they are nominal. They speak in today's dollars, while tomorrow's inflation laughs in a currency that devolves daily. The man over 40 with less than $1 million is not poor yet. He is pre-poor, living through the excruciating latency period between diagnosis and death. The disease is certainty. The symptoms are hesitation, optimization, the endless search for a balanced portfolio that balances nothing except his own delusion that safety still exists in a world that has quietly switched to predatory pricing on human time. Watch him closely now. This archetypal man in his late 40s, standing in the kitchen at 2:17 a.m., lit only by the refrigerator glow, staring at the same spreadsheet he has opened every night for 3 years. The cells no longer compute possibilities. They compute surrender dates. There is the year he must delay retirement. There is the year he downsizes. There is the year he returns to work after thinking he had escaped. Each cell is a small coffin for a version of himself he once believed in. And you, yes you, the one listening with the tightness in your chest that feels like guilt and grief having a child together, you recognize the taste. It is the metallic flavor of future regret already forming on the tongue. You feel it when you refresh the brokerage app one more time before bed, when you lie to your partner about being fine, when you catch your reflection and see not just aging but forfeiture. The face looking back is negotiating with poverty it hasn't met yet, trying to bargain it into something dignified. 2027 is not a year. It is the moment the illusion finally rips. It is the morning the market opens after another transitory inflation print that isn't transitory, when bonds reveal themselves as slow-motion theft, when the house you stretched to buy in 2021 becomes an anchor instead of an asset, when the promotion you were counting on goes to someone younger who costs less to insure. It is the precise second the man realizes the game was never rigged against him. He simply played it with the wrong rules, while the rules were changing in plain sight. He thought prudence was accumulation. It was never accumulation. It was velocity disguised as patience. The wealthy didn't save their way to freedom. They escaped the slow bleed most call safety. While he diversified into mediocrity, they concentrated into inevitability. While he clipped coupons, they clipped decades off the sentence of labor. While he balanced, they unbalanced everything in favor of the only asymmetry life ever truly offers: time. The terror deepens when he finally admits the real betrayal was never the market, never the government, never the Fed printing money like a drunk counterfeiter. The betrayal was intimate. It happened in the quiet moments when he chose the appearance of prudence over the violence of commitment. He mistook stillness for wisdom when stillness was just paralysis wearing a cardigan. Observe him now in the fluorescent hum of the office he swore would be temporary 23 years ago. The man has become a museum of almosts. Almost saved enough, almost took the leap, almost left the soul-draining job, almost bought the business that would have compounded into freedom. Each almost is a preserved specimen of cowardice dressed as caution. He walks past them every day, these glass cases of unlived life, and pretends not to notice the dust. And you, yes, you again, the one whose pulse just quickened because recognition is a form of violence, you feel the same museum forming in your own chest. Every unmade decision calcifying into an exhibit. The crypto wallet you never funded in 2017. The rental property you talked yourself out of in 2019 because it felt risky. The side business you researched for 18 months and abandoned when the first obstacle appeared. These are not regrets yet. They are pre-regrets, still warm, still pretending they might resurrect themselves if only the timing improves. But timing never improves for the man who waits for certainty. Certainty is the narcotic of the permanently middle class. He injects it daily. It'll start when the market corrects. It'll concentrate when I have more ill. Take the leap after the kids are through college. Each dose buys another year of the same slow hemorrhage. The wealthy do not wait for certainty. They create inevitability through the sheer force of irreversible action. They understand that risk is not the possibility of loss. Risk is the certainty of decay while standing still. Look closer at the psychology of the pre-poor man over 40. He has developed an exquisite allergy to asymmetry. He fears the 30% drawdown more than the 100% opportunity cost of doing nothing. He would rather guarantee slow death than risk sudden embarrassment. This is not rationality. This is trauma wearing the mask of sophistication. Somewhere in childhood, he learned that standing out was dangerous, that boldness was punished, that the tallest nail gets hammered. So he perfected the art of being just successful enough to avoid shame, but not successful enough to escape the script. His portfolio reflects this psychic wound perfectly. 60 positions. None large enough to matter, all mediocre enough to feel safe. A mutual fund zoo of half measures. He calls it diversification. It is actually diffusion of responsibility. If everything performs averagely, no single decision can be blamed for catastrophe. He has engineered a life where mediocrity becomes the only acceptable outcome, because excellence would require the unforgivable sin of being wrong in public. Meanwhile, the years accelerate. 45 becomes 50 with the casual brutality of a car crash you see coming but cannot swerve away from. The children grow expensive. The parents grow fragile. The body begins sending invoices for decades of neglect, and still he balances. Still he waits. Still, he diversifies his way into the quiet desperation that Thoreau warned about, except his desperation is no longer quiet. It has begun to whisper constantly in the voice of compound interest working against him. The calendar becomes a silent torturer. Each new year arrives not as possibility but as evidence, another 12 months of controlled hemorrhage. By 52, the man has perfected the art of dying in installments. He no longer flinches when the retirement calculator spits out 78, then 81, then never as the retirement age. He simply adjusts the inputs, lower expected returns, higher life expectancy, slightly more frugality, until the machine stops screaming and begins to purr a lie he can live with. Watch him in the grocery store now. This ghost of a man who once believed he was building something. He stands paralyzed in front of the meat counter, calculating whether the ribeye is worth the extra $8 against the backdrop of a retirement that may never come. The calculation is no longer about taste. It is about triage. Every small luxury is weighed against the specter of a future where even ground beef feels extravagant. He chooses chicken thighs again. He tells himself it is discipline. It is defeat wearing the mask of virtue. And you, the one whose stomach just twisted because you have stood in that exact aisle performing the exact same autopsy on your own future, you know the texture of this particular shame. It is not the grand shame of bankruptcy or addiction. It is the smaller, more corrosive shame of incremental surrender. The shame of the man who earns 6 figures yet cannot afford the life his parents had on one income. The shame of watching younger versions of himself, men who took the asymmetric bet, who concentrated instead of diversified, who refused the narcotic of balance, buy freedom while he buys another year of the same fluorescent lit cage. 2027 is not merely a year on this man's calendar. It is the moment the anesthesia finally wears off. It is the morning he wakes to discover that the safe 60/40 portfolio has delivered exactly what mathematics always promised: 60% of nothing and 40% of less. Bonds, those ancient talismans of prudence, have become certificates of confiscation. The cash that once felt like security now feels like a pile of melting ice cubes in a warming world. The house he stretched to afford has become a 30-year anchor chained to his ankles while the current of inflation drags him backward. His friends begin to reveal themselves in their true forms. The ones who talked endlessly about diversification and risk-adjusted returns are quietly taking second jobs, liquidating heirlooms, moving parents into spare bedrooms that were meant for grandchildren. The ones who never joined the conversation, who bought boring businesses at fair prices and then disappeared to live their lives, are absent entirely. They are on boats, in second homes, in countries where their dollars stretch like kings. They do not post about it. They do not need to. Their silence is the loudest flex of all. The man over 40 with less than $1 million begins to understand, too late, that wealth was never about accumulation. It was about escape velocity. The rich did not save more. They escaped the slow gravitational pull of mediocrity through the violent thrust of concentration and patience. While he spread himself across 60 mediocre positions, they poured everything into 6 exceptional ones, and then had the audacity to do nothing for decades. Doing nothing, it turns out, was the ultimate power move. The pre-poor man's mind becomes a battlefield where rationality wages war against the entrenched forces of denial. He knows, on some cellular level, that the asymmetry he fears is the only path to salvation. Yet he clings to the balanced portfolio the way a drowning man clings to driftwood that is actually sinking him. Balance, that seductive lie sold by financial advisors who earn commissions on complexity, has become his religion. He prays at the altar of asset allocation, reciting mantras of 60/40 and rebalancing quarterly, while the gods of compound interest turn their backs in disgust. Observe the subtle ways this faith manifests. The biannual meeting with the planner who nods sagely and adjusts nothing meaningful. The subscription to newsletters promising risk-adjusted alpha that deliver only more jargon. The quiet deletion of emails from bolder friends who escaped years ago. He has outsourced his freedom to algorithms and averages, believing that the crowd's wisdom will save him when the crowd is actually the executioner. By 2027, the revelations accelerate. The safe bonds he loaded up on in 2023 yield 4.5%, while inflation whispers 5.8% in the fine print of every CPI report. The cash emergency fund that ballooned to 18 months of expenses, just in case, always just in case, has eroded like beach sand in a storm. The diversified funds, those paragons of prudence, trail the market by the exact amount of their fees, compounded into a chasm. He begins to see the arithmetic not as abstract numbers but as stolen years. Each 1% underperformance is another 6 months chained to the desk, another holiday missed with grandchildren, another medical bill that forces compromise. And you, the one whose breath has shallowed because this mirror is too clear, too cruel, you feel the arithmetic carving into your own flesh. It is not just money lost, it is life unlived. The weekends you could have claimed, the passions you could have pursued, the peace you could have purchased, all deferred in the name of safety that was never safe. You scroll through projections late at night, watching the lines diverge, the red line of your current path plunging into inadequacy, the green line of what could have been soaring into abundance. The gap between them is not dollars, it is dignity. The man over 40 begins to fracture under the weight. Sleep becomes a negotiation with anxiety. Dreams arrive not as escape but as accusation. Visions of a younger self screaming, "Do something," while the older self mumbles excuses about volatility and black swans. He wakes with the taste of ash, knowing that the black swan was always him, his own hesitation, his own diffusion of energy, his own refusal to concentrate force where it mattered. His relationships bear the scars. The spouse who once shared dreams now shares silences heavy with unspoken blame. "We should have" becomes the prefix to every conversation about the future. The children sense the shift, their inheritance not wealth but worry, their futures tainted by the parents' unhealed wounds. Friendships stratify. The concentrated few who bet big and won big drift into different orbits, while the diversified many huddle together in mutual commiseration, trading stories of what if like prisoners trading cigarettes. Yet even in this deepening dusk, the psyche clings to narratives of redemption. He tells himself 2027 is a wake-up call, not a death knell. He begins researching furiously. Books on Munger and Buffett, forums on value investing, calculators that promise salvation if only he starts now. But the research becomes another form of procrastination, another layer of analysis paralysis. He accumulates knowledge without action, mistaking understanding for execution. The wealthy didn't read their way to freedom. They acted their way out of bondage, often with incomplete information but complete conviction. The emotional architecture crumbles further. Pride, once a fortress, becomes a prison. He cannot admit to peers that his prudence was folly, that his balance was imbalance. So he doubles down, defending the diversified path with increasingly hollow arguments. "At least I didn't lose everything," he says, ignoring that he lost something worse, the chance to gain everything. This cognitive dissonance ferments into resentment toward the system, toward the successful, toward his younger self who didn't know better. Resentment, that thief of energy, steals what little momentum remains. The year 2027 arrives not with a bang, but with a slow, suffocating tightening. The man wakes to headlines that feel like personal indictments. Inflation reaccelerates. Bond massacre deepens. Retirement crisis hits boomers early. Each article is a mirror reflecting back the face he has been avoiding. The portfolio statements no longer arrive as polite disappointments. They arrive as eviction notices from the future he once believed was guaranteed. He stands in the shower, letting the water run cold because the gas bill has become another negotiation with scarcity. The body that once carried ambition now carries the physical weight of deferred dreams. The shoulders rounded from decades of playing it safe, the eyes that flinch from direct sunlight because they have spent too long staring at screens calculating escape routes that never materialize. The mirror shows not just aging, but surrender etched into every line. And you, the one who has followed this descent with the sick recognition of a man watching his own autopsy performed while still breathing, you feel the final layers peeling away. The stories are gone now. No more in building for the long term. No more the market will come back. No more, at least I was responsible. What remains is the raw, animal confrontation with consequence. The knowledge that the game was winnable, that others won it with the same starting cards, that the only difference was the willingness to endure temporary discomfort for permanent freedom. In this crucible, something ancient stirs. Beneath the layers of socialization, beneath the conditioning that equated balance with virtue and boldness with recklessness, there is a primal recognition. The man has been living someone else's definition of safety. The diversified portfolio, the emergency fund that became a prison, the career ladder climb for security rather than sovereignty, all of it constructed from borrowed fears and inherited scripts. The terror of 2027 is not financial ruin. It is the sudden, blinding clarity that ruin was always optional. The psyche, cornered at last, begins its final rebellion. Not the frantic rebellion of youth that burns bright and burns out, but the slower, more dangerous rebellion of middle age that has nothing left to lose. The man who spent decades avoiding sharp edges now seeks them out. He sells the mediocre funds that promised safety and delivered mediocrity. He liquidates the bonds that chained him to slow decay. He takes the tax hit like a man ripping off a bandage grown into his own skin. The pain is immediate and cleansing. He studies the great escapes, the quiet men and women who concentrated everything into 6 or 8 wonderful businesses and then had the audacity to do nothing for 30 years. He learns their names: Coca-Cola, American Express, Apple, See's Candies, not as stocks but as liberation theology. He begins to understand that wealth is not a scorecard but a severance package from obligation. The goal was never to own more. It was to owe less to the employer, less to the lender, less to the slow grind of average returns. The portfolio shrinks from 60 positions to 8. The emergency fund shrinks from 18 months to 6. The fear is excruciating. Every headline screams that he is reckless now, that concentration is gambling, that he has finally lost his mind. But beneath the fear runs a current of something long dormant: aliveness. For the first time in decades, he is making decisions that could actually matter. The stakes are no longer theoretical. He stops reading the financial news that once fed his anxiety like a drug. He stops attending the dinner parties where men compare 401k balances like prisoners comparing sentences. He begins to measure wealth not in dollars but in Thursdays. How many Thursdays remain before he must return to fluorescent lights and performance reviews? The number is smaller than he feared and more precious than he imagined. The man who once measured life in safe percentages now measures it in reclaimed mornings. The first Thursday he does not set an alarm feels like a crime, and then, slowly, like absolution. He walks outside while the neighborhood still sleeps, coffee in hand, and realizes the sky has been this color all along. He simply never had time to notice. Something inside him that had been clenched since 1998 finally loosens. The portfolio of 8 businesses begins its quiet work. No ticker tape parades, no victory laps, just the steady, almost insulting reliability of exceptional companies, compounding while he learns how to occupy his own life again. The statements arrive quarterly now instead of daily, and he opens them the way a free man opens mail, curious, but no longer afraid of what they might say. The numbers climb with a dignity that feels obscene after decades of dignified mediocrity. He discovers that freedom has a texture, the weight of a book read at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday with no meeting looming, the sound of his own laughter when something is genuinely funny instead of politely amusing, the way his wife's hand finds his in the car without either of them calculating what tomorrow's expenses might forbid. These are not bonuses of wealth. These are wealth itself, finally stripped of its disguises. The old friends call, half concerned, half curious. You sold everything? Aren't you scared? He hears the tremor beneath their bravado, the same tremor that once lived in his own voice. He answers honestly now, terrified and alive. They nod politely and change the subject because the truth is too sharp for their carefully balanced lives. He does not judge them. He simply stops attending the support group for the comfortably doomed. Years compress. The man who feared 2027 becomes the man who barely remembers it. The 8 businesses do what exceptional businesses have always done. They grow earnings, raise dividends, compound quietly while the world screams about the next crisis. His net worth crosses the old milestones without ceremony. 1 million, 2, 5, because milestones no longer matter. The only number that matters is the shrinking distance between today and the last day he ever has to earn money he doesn't want to earn. He begins giving money away, not from virtue but from overflow. The act feels like exhaling after holding breath for 40 years. He funds scholarships for kids who remind him of his younger, terrified self. He buys his parents the care they never asked for but always deserved. He takes his wife to places they once pinned on vision boards as jokes. None of it feels like spending. It feels like circulation wealth, moving through him instead of calcifying around him. The greatest luxury is no longer time or money. It is indifference to the opinions of those still trapped in the old script. He no longer flinches when someone mentions diversification or risk management. He no longer explains. He simply smiles the small, private smile of a man who has seen both sides of the cage and chosen the air. One evening, years after the great unbalancing, he stands on a quiet beach watching the sun bleed into the water. His granddaughter asks why he looks so happy doing nothing. He considers the question the way a formerly drowning man considers water, with reverence, with distance, with the profound gratitude of one who knows exactly how close he came to never breathing again. He answers without thinking, because I finally learned that the safest thing a person can do is become dangerous to their own mediocrity. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.